Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now, South Africa and Russia have signed two memoranda of understanding on nuclear power cooperation. That is part of efforts by South Africa to lessen its reliance on coal and overcome power shortages that threaten economic growth. The agreement signed at the summit of emerging BRICS nations of UFA Russia are between Russia's state-run nuclear energy company Rosatom and South Africa's Department of Energy. They will also include programs for training specialists in South Africa's nuclear industry, and the country plans to build 6 new nuclear power plants by 2030 at an estimated cost of between $32 billion and $80 billion.
We think it is an appropriate theme of this BRICS, that BRICS partnership, a powerful factor in the global development. I think it's absolutely appropriate.
President of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. Now, according to a presidential spokesman, Burundi officials have plans to discuss their response to a call by African nations to delay a presidential election by 2 weeks to July the 30th. Regional African states meeting in Tanzania on Monday called for the July 15 presidential poll to be delayed to allow Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni to mediate. They also urged steps including disarming youth groups linked to political parties. Burundi was plunged into its worst crisis since the end of a civil war back in 2005 after President Nkurunziza announced in April that he would run for a third term in office, and that's a move opponents and protesters say is unconstitutional. But we're joined by one of our African news analysts, Mr. Warwick Onyema. He joins us from London. Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for joining us again on the program.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Now, I'd like to ask you, do you think this postponement of the elections in Burundi will solve the crisis?
No, it won't. I think that what has happened is that Nkurunziza's hand has been forced by a threat from the military, General Ngenda Kumana, who has threatened that he will cause an armed uprising unless Nkurunziza leaves office. So I think that has focused his mind a bit, and he has conceded to postpone the election until the 30th.
So, Mr. Onyema, at this point, what would you say is Burundi's best option in ending this crisis?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Well, I'll repeat the question. I said, what do you think is Burundi's best option to end this crisis?
It's very simple. I think Nkurunziza should leave office and probably go into exile. I think that would solve the problem.
Now, in the event that he does not leave office and go into exile, like you say, and chooses to stay in power, which clearly appears to be the case, what else can be done? Who should be doing what to help Burundi in case it comes to a point where they need some intervention from outside?
Well, you've had plenty of interventions. You've had interventions from the United Nations, you've had interventions from Europe and from the African Union. And up till now, Nkurunziza hasn't paid any attention to any of them, except the last one, and he has agreed to postpone it to the 30th. So I don't really see that interventions by anybody else is going to solve the matter.
So who's going to, at the end of the day, since no one from the outside is able to really have much influence in this case, what happens now? Because it certainly doesn't look like President Nkurunziza is going to give up his bid for a third term.
Well, if he's not going to go voluntarily, I think he'll have to be forced out. And I think the threat from his military to force him out unless he leaves is a very important one. I think that is really what weighs on his mind at the moment, and which will probably decide what happens next.
Well, Mr. Onyema, as always, thank you so much for your time on Network Africa. We appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Warwick Onyema, an African news analyst, speaking to us from London. Still to come on Network Africa. Italy holds a funeral service for 13 unidentified migrants recovered from the wreck of a boat which sank with more than 700 people on board.